Almost every millionaire, innovator, and athlete that you admire went through what you might be going through today: scared, unsure, underestimated. But it wasn't necessarily talent that separated them from the rest. Rather, it was a decision. It was their decision and choice to refuse to be average. So in this video, I'm going to show you what that top 1% mindset looks like. Let's jump in. As always, I would really appreciate it if you like this video and if you subscribe to my channel, especially if you learned something new. So with that, let's actually talk about the truth that really no one tells you. And that's about what average people do and what successful people do. Now, some of you might have heard of Grant Cardone. He is a fairly popular speaker, motivational speaker. This chart comes from him, but I thought it was pretty powerful, which is why I'm sharing it again. So average people, a lot of them, unfortunately, they give up easily. If there's some sort of, if they receive a no, for example, or some sort of obstacle, they don't continue and try a different way or just try again. They stop and do something else. They really like entertainment. Oftentimes, I forgot which speaker said this, but oftentimes you can judge by how above average a person is by their library. Do they have a library, or is their TV really big and prominent? So typically that can, not all the time, but that can oftentimes tell you where their mindset is. They think they know it all. And if they don't know it all, they don't think they can learn it. This is something called a fixed mindset. If you have read Carol Dweck's book, Dr. Carol Dweck, she is a researcher at Stanford University, and she wrote this fantastic book about mindset, and it talks about the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. And typically average individuals, they have a fixed mindset where they think that their ability to learn and to grow and be successful is fixed. It is a fixed trait, and they cannot actually learn it themselves and grow and be better. And then finally, oftentimes they're pretty lazy. I mean, not everyone, right? I mean, we all, at least I do. I certainly have lazy days where I don't want to do anything because I need a mental break, basically. But oftentimes average individuals, they can't just find that motivation to get up, to exercise, to learn something new, etc. That's why they stay average. However, successful people, and whatever success means for you, it doesn't necessarily translate to finances, right? It could be happiness. So understand what success means to you, and then look at some of this list. Some of these things in this list, like persistence, grit. These are things, grit is my favorite word, four-letter word. Grit, they just don't give up. And if something doesn't work, then they try a different way. And if it still doesn't work, then they try something that's adjacent to that niche or idea or whatnot. Education, they are voracious readers. They love spending money on themselves for education because they know that in the end, the ROI is so much higher. They're always curious. Like they always want to know why or how come or why does this happen? They don't just settle for the facts and think they know it all. Because oftentimes, if we think we know it all, then you really don't want to be the smartest person in the room, because then you're in the wrong room, as that adage says. And then finally, taking action. So 10 times, this is homage to Grant Cardone's speaker series or whatnot. So ignore the 10 times. But taking action, that's the important piece that I want you to get from this. So just do it, as the Nike logo says, right? So the real differentiator here is they start messy. They don't care how they start. They just start, which translates into action, which translates into Nike's just do it. I had to put it in here. Sorry. I wanted to share an example of someone who I think really embodies a lot of these qualities of an above average or successful individual. Now, in this case, success also means financially, because Sarah Blakely, if you've never heard of her, definitely stay tuned because her story is incredible. She founded Spanx. So Spanx is a piece of clothing that women wear typically. And she founded it a couple of decades ago. And she was by no means, I would say, like your typical entrepreneur. She had a little bit in savings, $5,000. She really didn't have any investors. She didn't go to like the fancy VCs and all those companies asking for seed money and none of that. No, she bootstrapped it, at least initially. She had no background in fashion, and Spanx is fashion for women, right? So she doesn't really have that background or that expertise or knowledge. And she just called a ton of factories asking for them to manufacture her new thought out product, Spanx. 98 factories said no, like 98 times in a row they said no. And then the 99th factory said, yeah, we'll try it out. Let's do it. And so the point, what I'm trying to show here is that persistence, or again, grit, that very first point on the successful people chart, it really does pay off. I think it's very hard though, myself included, if people say no, I also sometimes take that personally. And I have to remind myself, do not take it personally, Fiona. It's just the nature of the business. Keep going and do not stop, because at some point, every no is going to lead you closer to that next yes. That's just how you have to think about it. They're stepping stones. That's it. Here's a little bit more about her story. I certainly encourage you to check it out. But essentially, long story short, she was actually trying to follow her father's footsteps, who was a lawyer. And so she was starting to take the LSAT exam down here and didn't do too well. And essentially was like, all right, this rejection is just redirection for me. What do I do next? And so she started coming up with the idea for Spanx. Very incredible story. Certainly recommend you check it out. The lesson that I'm trying to share is that rejection really does not or should not break you mentally or physically or emotionally. Hesitation really is what sets apart the great from the good. So hesitating and not taking action is what really can kill you. And that oftentimes leads to comfort. So hesitation often leads to comfort. And that's why typically the average person at least is, maybe lazy is a wrong word, but maybe we should say comfortable. Too comfortable, I would say, is probably the right word. Okay, moving on from here, let's take a look at how to win. This here's a cool framework. It's called the RISE framework, and I'll break it down for you. So first, you want to reframe failure. Again, failure, while it is obviously not the desired outcome, it can be that stepping stone. You want to ignore the noise. There's so much noise out there. Who do you listen to? Who do you ignore? You want to stay in motion. Again, don't be comfortable, because comfort is the worst drug of them all. And then finally, you want to expand your identity, learn more, meet new people, get new experiences. Don't just stay in the status quo. So let's zoom into the reframe failure piece. So failure is really a feedback loop. You get to learn more about why it didn't work and what can you do next to make it work. So here's an example. We probably know Elon Musk. He founded SpaceX, and 9 years ago, well, in this case, it's a little bit longer ago, but still over a decade ago now, SpaceX was not a laughingstock, but, a lot of people didn't take it seriously because it just failed so many times. Rockets blew up all the time. But you know what? Elon Musk did not stop, because he is a very persistent person. Again, going back to that first point under successful people, grit, persistence. He kept on iterating, learning from those failures, and then finally, now it's working. They finally land these rockets. So in the beginning, yeah, sure, people don't believe in you. They think that you're, a failure. They don't take you seriously. But after more tries, after learning, after staying persistent, you can absolutely win. Another example here, I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with MotoGP. It's a form of motorcycle racing. But there's this rider called Marc Marquez. He is arguably one of the best riders out there ever. And he had a really long bout of failures, like from, I think, 2020 or 2021 to 2025. 2024, he fell off his bike. Oftentimes he broke a lot of bones, and a lot of people wrote him off and thought that he was never going to be a world champion again. But he didn't. He kept on believing. He kept getting back on that bike. He kept going and pushing himself. I mean, these bikes, they go like 300 kilometers an hour, okay, on two wheels. And he kept going and going at like 31 or 32. And now finally in 2025, he became world champion again in MotoGP. Most people thought he was done. I mean, honestly, myself included initially, but he still made it. That is the mindset of a successful person. He was already successful before, but it just shows like mindset just makes such a big difference when everyone else goes against you. And that leads directly to that next point. Ignore the noise. People who never built anything, people who don't know what it's like to win on a MotoGP racing bike, like with Marc Marquez's example, or know how to build rockets, like Elon Musk's example, they love to tell you what can't be built. They love going against you because That's the only thing they can do, right? They don't know how to build a rocket. I don't know how to build a rocket. I don't know how to race a MotoGP racing bike. But here's this quote that I think is really powerful. Sorry for the grainy picture. An athlete won't judge you for working out. A millionaire won't judge you for starting a business, even if it's from scratch or you're bootstrapping it with like the last couple of $100 bills that you have saved. A musician won't judge you for trying to sing a song. And this is so important. It's always the people going nowhere who have something to say. I think that is such a powerful quote. Keep that in mind when you start determining what noise should you ignore. And sometimes that noise might come directly from your household. Maybe it comes from your friends. I don't know, but make sure you understand who to ignore and who to keep listening to. And finally, second to last, the S in the RISE framework, stay in motion. Momentum is so critical, right? So again, think of that initial framework we looked at, the average person versus the successful person. The average person is comfortable, right? They don't stay in motion. They like entertainment. They sit down, they shut off kind of at the end of the day. And that's okay. That's okay some of the times, but you don't always want to be in that persistent vegetative state, right? Or at least mental vegetative state. You want to be on the run, thinking of new things, even if it's a walk outside, right? You oftentimes get new ideas, think about new things, read a chapter of a new book. I'm not saying you need to read a whole new book every single day, but momentum is so much powerful. It's really powerful, and it really helps drive motivation even on the days when you're not necessarily feeling that motivated. And the goal is not huge things. Like I said, you don't need to read a book every single day. It's like a page or a chapter. Moving 1 inch, so we're talking really small intervals, that makes a big difference. And if you guys are familiar with James Clear, which James, he actually wrote this book called Atomic Habits. Fantastic book. It talks about these little tiny habits. So if you change 1% each day, so 1.01, which is 1%, to the power of 365, since there are 365 days a year, compounding, the point is to show this compounding interest, you have about 38% increase, or you are 38 times better than where you started. Versus if you're 1% worse every day, then you're 0.03% or 0.03 down, right? Or where you are. It's like, it's not good. And so the point is, even if you do one tiny thing to make yourself better, you're going to be 38 times or 38% better than where you were in the beginning. So atomic habits, small habits make a very big difference. And finally, the E in the RISE framework is expanding your identity. You want to act like your future self. If you're going to be a millionaire, act like a millionaire. I'm not saying go spend $5 million on a house that you can't afford. No. I'm saying read like a millionaire, inquire like a millionaire, think like a millionaire. How do you start this business? What does the supply chain look like? How does procurement look like? What is your network supposed to look like? Should you go out? Those are the things. I'm not necessarily talking about spending money like a millionaire, because also sometimes millionaires don't necessarily spend that much money either. That's why they're millionaires. They keep their money, they invest it. So invest like a millionaire. How about that? Like in the stock market or in real estate, if there's a potential deal and it doesn't drain your liquidity either, right? So you do have to make sure you think about these things, or even invest in a wealth advisor like a millionaire would. These are some things I mean by acting like your future self. And I thought this quote was pretty good. Make a decision to be successful right now. Honestly, success is a decision. Like I was saying in my introduction, it really was a decision that separates the great from the good. Most people never decide to be wealthy, and that is why they retire poor. You can make a decision to refuse to be average. Make that today by saying you will be wealthy. How much does that mean? What does wealth mean to you? Does it mean time? Does it mean money? Does it mean a smaller house, but more freedom? I don't know. You need to figure that out. But the most important thing is to start now. And this other motivational speaker, I believe he was actually Jim Rohn. He was the mentor, was the mentor. He passed away. But he was the mentor for Tony Robbins, who is another very successful motivational speaker. And I thought this was pretty powerful. The world, that's what he means by it, the world pays you what you believe you're worth. If you act and if you think like you are worth X thousands of dollars, and by acting, I also mean not just arrogant, but also knowing your stuff, coming prepared, offering good insights, providing solutions, not just questions, then you will start seeing that. If you know you belong to a better company because you are worth more, you will find a better company. You will leave your current company. That's what this is about. It will fall into place if you embody that mindset truly. And this other quote from Jim Rohn is, we must all suffer one of two things. I think this is so powerful. The pain of discipline, which can be painful, trust me, or the pain of regret. And honestly, the pain of regret right now, I'm going to say it, is much worse than the pain of discipline. Sure, maybe a little bit of a platitude, but absolutely true. Keep that in mind. Okay, next up, let's take a look at some real case studies from zero to hero. First, Ed Mylett. I don't think he's that popular, but Ed Mylett, he's very popular in athletic terms. And he's very popular for like in the motivational speaker side. He was broke as a college kid. He used discipline to help himself get out of it. And he found his niche, which is mentoring the wealthy being athletes, wealthy being innovators, millionaires, other people. That is who he mentors. And also an audience as well, like, general public audience. He's worth hundreds of millions of dollars, very similar to Grant Cardone, right? And Tony Robbins and all of these motivational speakers. Another one, Mr. Beast. I'm sure you're on YouTube. You've probably heard of Mr. Beast, right? He's essentially one of the big figures of YouTube. And I thought his story was really interesting too. He grew up at age 11 in North Carolina. He started posting YouTube videos, and he posted hundreds of videos before he hit 1,000 views. Now, 1,000 views is like nothing to him, right? He gets like millions of views. And very, very, very successful at however old he is now, in his mid-20s. And then I had to throw myself in there. Yeah, sure, I'm not as successful as Mr. Beast or Ed Mylett or any of the others. But what I want to say is that I didn't just wait for the opportunity to get this studio, to get the right equipment and all that, to build out my blog. I just did it, right? I'm not saying that I'm like Mr. Beast or any of those folks, not at all, by any means. But the point is, I am seeing some success, very, very modest in comparison to Mr. Beast, very small, but I'm still seeing some success. And the reason why is because I stopped waiting. I did wait for like 4 years. I was thinking about the Millennial Money Woman 4 years before it actually started in COVID. It was COVID that was the initial impetus for me to start MMW. However, I finally did. I didn't have a studio. I just wanted to get some financial content out there, and it worked. And now I'm still rolling with it 5 years later. All right. The next framework and the last framework we're going to talk about today for that top 1% mindset is become a millionaire. So the framework is the Million Framework. So very briefly, let's take a look at it. Let's zoom in on the M. So M is all about micro actions, which we already kind of talked about with the Atomic Habits book, right? 1% better each day leads to about 38% or 38 times better, 38% better at the end of the year. You want to do one hard thing daily. Momentum really does compound. Internal standards. Let me actually zoom out so it's a little bit easier to see. Internal standards. So this is how you hold yourself accountable. You don't really want to compete with others. You want to compete with yourself. Like always compete with yourself in the mirror. This is really hard. I think on one hand, if you compete with others who are better than you, that might drive you to be better, but it also might leave you wanting for something, I don't know, like a different, more satisfactory feeling. And you might not get that if you keep comparing yourself with others. Trust me, I speak from experience. The first L is for long-term vision. You want to think in 5-year increments, not 5-minute dopamine hits, right? You want to think long-term because again, if you really start thinking out, maybe 5 years isn't even right. Maybe it should be 10 years, 15, 20 years. The point is, as you start thinking further and further ahead, you're going to start seeing, you're going to start seeing how your plan kind of changes, right? You start building on your plan rather than like a short 5-minute dopamine hit, like watching your favorite show instead of studying or, doing whatever you really need to get done at that moment. You want to learn relentlessly. I personally suggest investing a minimum of 5% of your gross income into yourself and into your education. I personally invest a lot more than 5% into my education. I love learning. I love investing in myself. Reading 15 minutes a day, whatever it is. It doesn't even have to be reading. It could be listening to a podcast or a YouTube video like this one. that is a new ROI on your brain. And it also pushes you to really think more, different, hear different viewpoints. Maybe, listen to a podcast that has a viewpoint that you don't necessarily agree with. For example, if you're on one end of the political spectrum, listen to a podcast that is on the other end of the political spectrum, with just trying to understand where their viewpoint comes from. And yeah, it's an exercise. It's a mental exercise because your brain is a muscle after all. Invest in yourself. This is really important, whether that's education, whether that's a new skill, whether that's meeting new friends, taking out someone to lunch and building a network or a relationship, finding a new mentor, whatever it is. But honestly, the best stock that you will own really is your skill set. It's plain and simple. The O stands for own the blame. Take accountability. If you do something wrong, say it. Say what you did wrong and say how you're going to improve it next time. As it says, radical ownership is radical control. This gives you more control over your own life instead of trying to push it under the rug, not thinking about it, or blaming someone else, which is probably much worse. And then finally, the N in the million stands for never numb your dreams. Do not ever give up on your dreams. Don't trade your vision for a short-term distraction. All right, so this brings us back to that long-term vision. Focus on what your goal is. Silence the noise, as we talked about before. Do not be distracted by, something. If there is an experience that you've always been waiting for your entire life to go to, like a festival or something, then do it, obviously, if this is what you've wanted. But if it randomly pops up on your calendar and you haven't really calculated that into your calendar, into your mindset, and into your budget, then don't do it. Focus on what you've always wanted to do, your goal. Remember following your goals. That is so critical. Now, the 10-year question for you is, in 10 years, you'll either be grateful that you started today or you'll be haunted that you did not. And what's the difference? It is that decision. Again, that leads us back to the introduction of this video. It's the decision to believe into the long term and in yourself. So the most important thing is start building wealth now. If you found this video helpful and exciting and hopefully motivating, make sure to like this video and share it to help others. And also make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's _, don't forget that, MMW, for more cool insights. And make sure to join my newsletter that is pinned in the top comment below for more exclusive tips that's sent out every single week. Your bank accounts will thank you later. Thanks so much.